What's good, people? Izzy Max here, back with Dan. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me again.
So this is week 2 of the MDL pregame. Last week we had a whole bunch of really good games, but we're going to talk about the games that are going to be happening. Side note, we will not be talking about the week 1 game that has not happened yet. That will be talked about in the weekly breakdown for week 2, but it is not a week 2 match, so we will not cover it. But we will cover the transactions. So, Dan, why don't you start down there at the bottom with Hunter? What do you think?
So, Hunter's transaction with Amoongus for Thunderous, I'm very neutral on. I do think it's an upgrade for his team, don't get me wrong. It gives him the fast Brutal swing for a Metagross weakness policy proc. I do like the support sets that Thunderous can offer. I think Eerie Impulse is going to put in work for him this season a lot more than the offensive sets will. But it's also not Dusclops, so that sort of brings me down on it, because what Hunter's team is really missing is two. One was a fast way to trigger weakness policy on Metagross, which Thunderous does cover, and Dusclops would cover with Shadow Sneak, but also a bulky Trick Room set. If you look at what he has, he's got a lot of tools to operate inside of Trick Room, but his only setter right now is Beheeyem, which can hit hard and isn't a bad Pokemon, but is also very frail. Not that a lot of things would have been surviving that Regidrago last week, but Beheeyem definitely wasn't, and that's not the only thing that just one-shots it out of nowhere. But what are your thoughts on Hunter's trade?
So Thunderous does offer a little more to his fast mode, which I think is what he was trying to do. His team is relatively slow outside of his rain mode, which is why I'm kind of 50-50 on this. I do believe the Dusclops would have been slightly better, because then he could have traded that Beheeyem for something, well, better. It is a Beheeyem. So that's kind of where I sit on this. I don't mind the Thunderous. I do wish it was a Dusclops, but we'll have to see. This might be a long drawn out plan for him to fix what he has, but I mean, it does what he wants to in the short term. The main problem I have with this over Dusclops is this can still get faked out, and then you just have an unboosted Metagross. So that's one big positive I have over with Dusclops over Thunderous is Dusclops cannot be faked out, so you get your weakness policy procced. But we'll have to see where this one can go. So,
and Hunter does have the bye this week, so I could also see this being a part of like a 2-part transaction to also improve that bulky Trick Room mode before his next match. So we'll have to see what happens with that as well.
For sure. Next up, we have Burst dropping Pillow Swine for Mr. Rhyme. I love Pillow Swine, and I think it does a lot offensively, but there was kind of an issue with an Eviolite. So I think Mr. Rhyme is fine. It does give the team another Trick Room setter. Mr. Rhyme was actually on my radar. You'll see up at the top. I got what I wanted, but it's a good Pokemon. Tay used it last season to a lot of success. It can set Trick Room. It can proc. I don't even know what he can proc with Ice Shard, but I'm sure he has something. It's just yeah, you can proc Togetic, I guess. But it's an overall solid mon. I do like it because of the Eviolite issue. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely think it's an improvement for his team because of the Eviolite issue. It gives him a lot more flexibility with building, because he's going to put the Eviolite on Togetic, and if he doesn't, that I just feel like that's a mistake most weeks.
Yep.
And then with the Piloswine, you don't really get the bulk that it has, and you have to go with like a banded set, which is okay, but I think Mr. Rhyme's flexibility is an improvement for the team. And does Burst have Sceptile?
Yes. So you can proc Sceptile.
That's his proc. Yep.
That's not bad. I'd accept that. That's actually a good combo.
Yeah, I do think the Unburdened Sceptile is something he's going to bust out at some point this season next to Mr. Rhyme. He'll probably pick up a quick game with that at some point or another when it's unexpected.
Oh, yeah, and he should. That's for sure. What's next?
Next up, we got Toxic, who dropped Hitmonchan for Grapploct. I don't love this transaction because they seem similar to me, but I don't see what Grapploct does better than Hitmonchan. Like Hitmonchan seems to have better coverage, slightly better stat spread, and
Yeah,
that's really all the difference between them.
I really don't know with this one. I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I'd rather have the Iron Fist boosting the elemental punches rather than whatever the hell Graplock does, because I have no idea.
Yeah, it does have a trapping mechanism that could see play if he's able to build something perfectly for it, but I just think Hitmonchan, again, I'm a big fan of things that are flexible, and I think Hitmonchan is a lot more flexible than the Graplock, and just generally better in its various roles.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Next up, we have Silvally for Rhyperior from Jess. Um, I'll tell you right now, Silvally was hard to build with her. She really struggled to use it, and you have to use Silvally to cover your holes, but Silvally doesn't really cover those holes too well. So this is, I'm gonna tell you now, this is part of a process for her. This isn't gonna be the only trade you see. Usually she doesn't make very many trades, but this season she's gonna have to because she went away from what she's comfortable with. So look for more, but Rhyperior is definitely an upgrade. What do you think?
So Rhyperior is basically playing the role of Snorlax on the comp right now.
Yep.
And I do know she has some comfort with that kind of comp, so it's probably an upgrade for her. But for most people, I would prefer to see the Silvally, just because having built against Silvally last week, it's one of the hardest Pokemon to build around because you just don't know. Like, there are so many different things you have to cover for. Like, she ended up going with Ground, and that would have been my third or fourth choice for what I thought the Silvally was going to be. So
Right.
It does have the potential for surprise factor in various games, but I do think given her team, having a consistent Trick Room attacker is a good thing, because right now Slowbro was her setter and attacker, so I do think it gives her team a bit more depth.
For sure, for sure. So what's next? We got Charles.
Yes, we've got Orbeetle for Eldegoss. So I very recently learned what Eldegoss does, and it's basically sit there and be annoying.
Yep.
Which is also sort of what Orbeetle does, but I think Eldegoss has the potential to sit there and be more annoying. So I consider this an upgrade, even though I'm not super familiar with both of them inside VGC and Draft. I do think that Eldegoss is generally a bit better than Orbeetle.
I would agree. I do want to note, because I told him I was going to call him out on it. He originally drafted Eldegoss and dropped it for Orbeetle, and then he didn't play a game, and then picked up Eldegoss for Orbeetle. So
Fantastic.
yeah, I just want to kind of pointed that out. Yeah, not much to say on this one. They're both bulky mons that kind of just sit there. Eldegoss is a little bit more flexible in its supporting role. Yeah, that's about it. It's just, I think it's a better support mon than Orbeetle, because it can be a little more annoying with like Leech Seed and stuff like that, and Orbeetle really can't.
And it's got that annoying ability that when you
Cotton
hit
down.
it, everything gets slow, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Good
that's
abilities.
annoying.
Super good. Next up, we have Hector. Finally dropping the Turtonator for a proper tiered mon and grabbing Vaporeon. I straight up love this because I don't even think he had a water type before. So this is great. Vaporeon is super good. It does help with his rock and ground weakness. It's just an overall upgrade. I don't like dipping down in other tiers, especially on tier 3, and I think Vaporeon was just a super good pick. I kind of wish it was Jellicent, but Vaporeon is very, very good on what he has. What do you think?
I agree. Jellicent would have also been interesting in this slot, but Vaporeon as a bulky water support set, he's going to run Yawn on it a few times this season, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
It does a lot more for his team than Turtonator, which on a team with Charizard really doesn't offer as much.
And
so
Duraludon.
Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah. That doesn't offer much difference on his team. So Vaporeon is a different mon than something he already had. So strict upgrade.
Yep. I'm going to go ahead and take the next one so you can take mine. But Dina dropping Conkeldurr for Articuno Galarian form. I think Toxic really kind of put her team on blast when it came to Intimidate. I don't think she really realized how weak her team was to Intimidate until she played Toxic. And I think this is just a great trade, great upgrade. She does already have a really good Trick Room mode with the S Cavalier, so switching it up into something that you have to double take running Intimidate for in the Articuno, I just think is a great option. Articuno was on my list before we started drafting, but what do you think about Articuno on Dina's team?
So I'll be honest, if I didn't have Tornadus fall to me at pick 12, Articuno was on my short list of things to draft in that slot. Because I think it's one of the stronger things in tier 2. It just didn't fit on my team because I already had the flyer with the Tailwind.
Right.
And starting prep for her team, Intimidate was just so free before this Articuno thing. Like, I have 2 Mons with Intimidate on my team. I'm like, I just slam both of these, don't think about it, and rotate them, and she can't kill me. And now there's the potential that Articuno could come, which really changes up the way that I have to treat it. So I think this is the best transaction this week. I think her team was very strong. In my mind, it was a tier below the teams 1 through 4 in the power rankings, but I think this bumps it up into that tier.
Oh, for sure. All right, go ahead and take mine.
Yeah, so you dropped Glaceon for Mr. Mime, Galar version, which can use a Violite. It's bulky, has Trick Room and Ice Shard. It does a lot of the things Glaceon does. It doesn't hit Blizzard really hard, but you don't really have a mode to just want to spam Blizzard with. So it's probably an upgrade because it has a bit more utility, even at the cost of a bit less attacking power.
It has Fake Out.
Yeah, and it has Fake Out. So yeah, I think generally it looks like a solid upgrade. It fills the role that you had Glaceon filling. But it probably has a bit more flexibility for things that it can do on your team because Glaceon's not just going to sit there and click Blizzard because you're not really setting Hail ever.
Right. No, this is more of it has Fake Out. I didn't have a Fake Out user, which I know I have Psychic Terrain, but I think a Fake Out user would help. It could do the Ice Shard things. It's also a secondary, quote unquote, better Trick Room setter than what I have currently. So yeah, I looking at my prior matches, I didn't think Glaceon was actually more important than the options Mr. Mime could give me. So that's what I did there. But lastly, we have Matt dropping Diggersby for Mamoswine. I am a big Mamoswine fan, and I absolutely love this based on kind of what his team has. I feel like Mamoswine on paper doesn't look like it's an upgrade, but if you really dissect what he's probably going to want to do with it, I do believe it's an upgrade. You know, hitting multiple stab options, being faster, kind of, but also being immune to that Intimidate, and just giving him some other options to kind of work around with this Mamoswine. What do you think of this one?
This called out me specifically, I think. It makes me sad because I love Diggersby and I wanted to see it do work this season, and now we're going to have to wait for someone else to pick it up. But looking at his division, the matchup with me, this definitely improves the matchup. And it improves a few of the other matchups where you guys noticed that there were a couple teams that were weak to a combination of ice and ground. And Mamoswine offers that combination of ice and ground. So it's probably an upgrade, even though I don't like it because I just think Diggersby is cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of ice and ground combo weaknesses in this league this season, but those are the transactions. This is how we'll do it every week. We'll start with these and then we'll go into the games. But for our first one, making sure, yes, we have Matt versus Jess. And Dan, I'm going to let you take this one.
Great. So I think this is going to be a really interesting matchup. I picked Raichu and Arctozolt as my 2 most important options this week because I do think the Arctozolt offensively into Matt's team hits a lot of things super effectively. It hits the Steela, it can hit the Raichu, it can hit the Drago, Pelipper, Salazzle. I think it hits the Ludicolo. It hits the Archeops. Like, it hits so many things on his team. And especially the Max Electric, I think, is going to be very threatening towards that Celesteela, which otherwise walls out a large portion of Jess's team. But the big problem with the Max Lightning into Celesteela is Matt's top option, which I think is the Raichu, because if he has it in the back and can switch it in, he can just eat a Max Electric, waste a turn of Dynamax, and Jess is very sad then because the Stila starts attacking.
Right.
So
Yeah.
those are my two most important options. But what are your thoughts with the two steel types?
Okay, yeah, so I did pick the two steel types in the matchup in the Celesteela and the Kartana. Overall, Celesteela does have the edge because it can pack that flamethrower, but Celesteela, outside of having flamethrower, which is going to have to take up a move slot, can't really hit the Kartana super well. And Kartana can kind of target around it. Like, if Matt wants to run a Leech Seed set, Kartana doesn't care. And Kartana really deals with the Regidrago. Doesn't take too much. I know it is hitting on the special side, but Regidrago doesn't have much in terms of coverage. It can deal with the Pelipper. Salazzle's an issue, but if we're setting Rain, it's a Salazzle. It can hit the Ludicolo, kind of. It can hit the Archeops. There's just not a lot of things that Matt has that can actually deal with the Kartana, and that's why I picked it. But on the other end of the spectrum, Raichu was going to be my pick, but I'll just pick the offensive partner for it. Is going to be the Celesteela because the main options just has to deal with it, kind of get shut down with that Raichu. Overall, this is going to be another positioning game, which I feel like is going to be all of Jessica's games. But I look forward to this one.
Yeah, definitely. And I didn't mention the Nuzzle on the Raichu to affect the speed, especially of the Kartana and potentially the Dragonite if it comes. That's another potential really big swing moment in the matchup.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Next up, we have John and Burst. This one's going to be interesting. I actually had trouble picking my two key mons in this matchup, but I ended up landing on Suicune and Magnezone. So the reason I picked Suicune was because outside of the Magnezone, Burst doesn't really have anything that can hit it. Granted, he does have the Sceptile and now the Mr. Rime with Freeze Dry, but it's a Suicune. It's super bulky. It can hit both of those mons for good damage. Ice Beam, of course, for the Sceptile. So I think it's going to have a real good matchup. Even if it's bulky, I feel like it's going to be able to chip a lot of these mons down. And on the other side is the Magnezone. Outside of things like Rillaboom, this thing hits everything for super, super good damage. Suicune, Comfey, Regirock, Mandibuzz, Credilli, Aurorus, Fletchinder, I guess. I just think these two mons are going to have a solid matchup. And this is more, I feel like this matchup is going to be more who built the right defensive mons instead of who has the better offense. Because if you look, these are two very kind of synergistic defensive teams. And it's going to be whoever can do that the best, I feel like. What do you think?
Yeah, I can agree with that. And that's part of the reason why Togetic was my pick on Burst side. I do think redirecting super effective attacks into the Togetic is going to be pretty important for him this week, specifically from the Rillaboom, which is my pick on John's side, because Rillaboom sort of hits most of Burst's team except for Talonflame. Yeah, it's only neutral into Urshifu, but I take Rillaboom in that matchup most of the time anyway. And it hits the Feeny really hard. It hits the Magnezone with the high horsepower. It hits Mesprit, like for neutral damage, unless it does knockoff, then it hits that as well. It hits the Lycanroc. So I do think the Rillaboom is the best offensive mon on either side in this game. But I do think the Togetic trying to neutralize it is going to be the best answer to it. Like, neutralize and whittle it down, unless he goes into an offensive Talonflame set, which would also be pretty cool to see. But I do think Rillaboom is going to be the pressure for most of this game.
For sure. Next up, it's going to be me. So this is going to be Dan and Dina. This one was actually interesting to kind of pick my two mons because I don't think, like, some games you can be like, oh, this mon's going to have just a super heyday, or, oh, this mon just sweeps if it gets to do what it wants to do. With this match, I feel like it's more combo oriented, but because of the format we have, I picked Garchomp for Dan. I feel like it does hit a lot of the mons super effectively, and outside of like Clefable and Noivern, there's not really much that Dina can do to hit this thing. But on Dina's side, because Dan has like Intimidate options and like Max Wormwinds, Max Ghost, all them things, I really think the Galarian Articuno is going to be so key maybe not as a lead option, but you're switching it in when you know there's going to be a max dragon on the Pokemon right beside it, or just getting it in a super favorable position, maxing it, and just sweeping after a competitive boost. I think that thing's going to be a threat. But like I said, I feel like this is a combo game, not so much a I got to get this mon in and sweep. Not so much positioning either. It's just going to be really mitigating resources and just whittling each other down, because there's not a big offensive option that can really take advantage of the other's offense. What are your thoughts on your own game without giving too much away?
I do think it's going to be a pretty interesting game. Diglett is slept on. But in all seriousness, I do think it's going to be very good. I think you're spot on with the Articuno selection. I would be pretty stunned if she doesn't have it.
Yeah.
So if she wants to big brain me and not bring it and have something else, then that could be the play. But I do think that overall, your selections are pretty spot on.
Good. Next up, here you go.
So you and Ryan, I think this is a very interesting matchup, less because of the teams, but more because of who you two are as people and how well you know each other. There's going to be years of history and understanding how the other team builds going into this. So I'm just going to briefly go over what I think about the Pokemon, but I think the matchup of predicting the other person to predict ad infinitum is going to be the most interesting part of this match. But on Ryan's side, Haxorus hits a lot of things on your team really hard. Like a Max Haxorus, I don't know, maybe with a Dragon Dance or a Swords Dance set up next to Indeedee, can do quite a lot. Even if it isn't set up, its attack is like 147, and you don't have a lot on your team that can resist all of its coverage. Like, he can have good coverage that attacks your entire team with it, because it gets like 12 or 13 types of coverage. On your side, I think the Indeedee is the key option, because his best offensive options are Moltres, Haxorus, and Blaziken. And I mean, not Indeedee, the Tapu Lele, psychic terrain things.
Yeah.
The Lele hits Moltres, Blaziken, and Haxorus for super effective damage, and those are his best offensive options if he goes for a fast mode. A Trick Room matchup could be pretty interesting as well, but I do think it's a pretty straightforward, two very similar but different teams. They're similar in that they are not the grinded out positioning types. They're the I'm going to beat you with the lead and just start picking up KOs early, get a numbers advantage, and then win that way. But different in that yours relies on weather, speed control, powerful spread attacks, whereas his relies on potential setup and redirection. So I think this will be a very interesting match. I think even if it goes 3 games, time on the video will be shorter than the time between Matt and Jess's match, even if that one only goes 2 games, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah. So a little bit of a backstory. Me and Ryan was my front office for a majority of the time before he started competing himself in leagues. So I know how he builds. He knows how I build. So we both have to go out of our comfort zone, because if we don't, the other person is going to 100% read us like a book. And that's how it was last season, and we played each other twice. And I expect nothing different from this one. So I'm excited for this match. Next up. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, it's going to be a pretty exciting match.
Oh, for sure. Next up, we have Toxic and Charles. So this is the first time we'll see Charles. He did have the bye last week. But the 2 mons I got both dragon types. Dragapult, depending on if he runs physical or special, has a decent matchup against a lot of these things. I do think special is the way to go this week. Because it does just hit a lot of things. You got Dragon for Naganadel. You're going to have to deal with the Heatran, but then you can have Thunder or Electric for the Corviknight, Water for the Mudsdale. You'll have to deal with the Aromatisse in different ways, but I think Dragapult, not so much in the match is going to be key, but in prep for Charles, he really has to figure out what Dragapult set is going to be brought. And I feel like that's going to be kind of an issue, because if he gets it wrong, it could really hurt. But on the other end, Naganadel is kind of one of those mons that we don't really know what to expect out of it. It hits hard. It's really fast. I believe it could be physical or special. But with Toxic, not saying he's a bad player, but sometimes his inexperience can kind of show. And I think the inexperience with Naganadel might actually have Charles with kind of a leg up, mainly in game 1, because Toxic maybe be able to pivot and kind of know what it's going to do in game 2. But I think game 1, it's going to be interesting to see how Toxic kind of deals with that Naganadel. Dan, what do you got?
So I went with a different direction here. I think the Naganadel is actually pretty hard to bring from Charles's end because he doesn't have a good form of redirection, and it just loses very hard to Dragapult a lot of the time. So I went with Blastoise and Corviknight because Blastoise beats a lot of the things on Charles's team that the Dragapult doesn't, and beats it very convincingly. Like, it beats the Heatran, it beats Mudsdale, and those are the big ones that I think are potential offensive options from Charles. So that's why I think the Blastoise is going to be very important this week. But that's also kind of why I think the Corviknight is going to be important, because Blastoise doesn't necessarily beat Corviknight super convincingly, and neither does Dragapult, because Corviknight can reflect the stat losses that it gets from max moves. So I do think the Corviknight as a defensive piece to fight the Dragapult and Blastoise is going to be important. Otherwise, I think those two together will be just sort of oppressive offensively. So that was sort of my thoughts for this match.
For sure. It's going to be interesting because, like I said, this is going to be Charles's first showing. He did play Season 1 and took a break in Season 2. So we'll get to see how much rust is actually there. But I think it'll be a good match. Next up, is this our last one? Yes, it is. Dan, why don't you go ahead and take our last matchup?
Yes, we've got Hector and Dark. This will be... Well, it will be Dark's second matchup, but his first matchup was delayed until later this evening, so it will be one of the first times we see him. We haven't seen him yet. But I have Alolan Persian and Hippowdon as the important things in this matchup. The Alolan Persian, I think, is going to be pretty necessary as a support option against a lot of what Dark sets up to do, especially because it is very, very physically bulky, and a lot of Dark's offenses do come on the physical spectrum. I just think as a bit of almost a defensive pivot that can also use Parting Shot, it's going to be important for neutering the momentum that Dark has the ability to generate. The other end, I think a bulky Hippowdon does really well into Hector, like surprisingly well if you look at it. If you run the right set, it can beat Charizard, it can beat Aleki, it can beat Duraludon. Probably trades evenly with Persian and Klefki, but those are other support options. Like, it has late game potential to 1v1 or 1v2 some of his stronger options potentially out of nowhere, and the Maractus of this week, if you will. But what are your thoughts on this matchup?
So it's gonna be a weird one. Usually you can kind of see a flow chart. Kind of, if you just look at a team, look at your opponent, and be like, oh, well, this, and this. You don't see that here. That's kind of why I picked the Weezing for Hector. A lot of Dark's things wants their ability. Dracozolt, either with the Sand Rush or the Hustle. Chandelure, Flash Fire could be important. Competitive Milotic. Technician Scizor, Sand on the Hippowdon. You know, there's just a lot of things that really want their abilities. And I feel like if Hector can kind of turn them off and function in a way where he doesn't need his as well, he's gonna put Dark kind of on the back foot. On the other end, I was gonna pick Hippowdon, but Dan beat me to it this week, so I'm gonna go with the Chandelure. It kind of nullifies Charizard in a weird way because it can't just freely launch off fire moves. And then if it does get that Flash Fire boost, you know, it deals relatively well with Duraludon. It doesn't have the best special defense. Persian is usually physically defensive. It kills the Klefki. Aerodactyl isn't very defensively known. Weezing is physically defensive. There's just not a lot of things that Chandelure can't hit really, really hard. So if Dark is able to get that in a good position, I feel like it's going to really put in a lot of work in this matchup. And also, speed tiers aren't going to be incredibly important. If you look at it, Chandelure surprisingly is one of the faster things out here. You do have the Charizard, the Alecki, and the Aerodactyl, but outside of that, Persian could hit it with a foul play, which is going to do a bunch of damage, but you're not really going to want Chandelure out on the field with that Persian. And other than that, Chandelure kind of outspeeds a whole bunch of it, which is kind of interesting. But like I said, this is going to be a weird one. This match could go 100 different ways, just based on how these teams are built. But that's going to do it with us. Dan, what is your marquee matchup of the week?
I mean, it's got to be you and Ryan. You guys were two of the top performers last season. You were teams 1 and 2 in the preseason power ranking, even if I feel like I got gypped a little bit. And because of how well you guys know each other, it's going to be really interesting sets. Like, there's going to be something stupid's going to happen this week, and stupid in a good way and a bad way at the same time. And I'm very excited to see what it is.
For sure. We are two very capable battlers and very capable of pivoting into different styles. So, yeah, I agree. As weird as it sounds, mine's going to be your match. I liked what I seen out of Dina against Toxic, and knowing that she has that Intimidate weakness, she did pick up something to just immediately fill that hole. So this is going to be an interesting game. We all know you're a really good battler. I know how Dina battles both in other leagues, and now we've seen a match here. I'm just really excited, and if she can take this game off you, she is going to solidify herself as being a major component in this league in particular. So I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I do have one small complaint for the scheduling committee of one. After winning last week, I'm in a lose-lose situation because either I'm the guy who beat the only 2 women in the league in back-to-back weeks to start the season, or I've lost. So that's pretty lose-lose for me. But so thank you for that. But otherwise, I do think it will also be a pretty good match.
Yeah, hey, random algorithm, man. That's all I have to say. Blame the computer. But like I said, that is going to do it for us. Super excited for this week after seeing last week's games. Everything looks positive. There's not a weak link in this league at all. Everybody is very competitive. I do hope Hunter, after this bye week, can get his shit together. Just kidding. Haha. But no, I'm super excited. I think everybody's going to play very well, and looking forward to this week.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. This is the first week that I have not used a transaction in the MDL in my history of playing in it. So I'm very excited to have some team continuity this season. But I'm very much looking forward to the rest of the season. It's going to be a great season.
Yep. So without further ado, we will see you guys in our respective breakdowns. So peace.